Welcome back to the Brandon Gold Show, everybody. Super fired up to have Scott Emerson, pitching coach for the Athletics. Really excited to have him here in the lab today.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Just really wanted to give people kind of a dive into what it looks like and at the professional level, at the big league level. Scott, you've been around the game for a long time, especially in professional baseball, and you know what it looks like. We had a really cool interaction, the first time we met a couple weeks ago. We were talking about some motor preferences and just how things work in the human body. And I really want people to kind of hear your story and kind of your thought process on how you look at talent, how you develop talent, and really what it means to be a pitcher at the highest level, where that starts at.
Yeah, I think motor preferences come out, and people get kind of got nervous or scared of it. I just call it player profiling, pretty much. That's what we've always done. Our whole career as coaches and evaluators has gone out, seen people, and the first thing you see is them and their body and how they move, and you try to correlate that to pitching and how we can make it easier for everybody. I think people got scared off by that word per se, but guys throw right-handed for a reason. Guys hit left-handed for a reason. I'm a left-handed thrower, but I write right-handed. I play tennis or ping pong right-handed. I shoot pool left-handed. If I use a hammer, I'm right-handed. So those are profiles that I have. I use it more as player profiling, understanding what uh, how guys like to move, whether they have a one power leg that favors pushing and one leg that favors extension and flexion. And you just kind of put the pieces together. All right, does he favor pronation or supination? Does he have high T spine mobility or low T spine mobility? And you're just taking these profiles and you're just putting pieces together. A tall and fall pitcher, I use those terms, drop and drive pitcher. One guy can get deeper into a horizontal scap load, where the tall and fall guy just doesn't have time to get deep into a scap load. And it's just understanding that. The tall and fall guy may have a straight up and down delivery, where the drop and drive type guy may get into the glute a little bit more and into the backside a little bit more and be able to be more rotational. Somebody talked to me the other day about you're either a Ferris wheel and a merry-go-round, and I said no, you're actually both. You're going to favor one side depending if you're an upright posture guy or you like to sit a little bit deeper. You favor the merry-go-round or the Ferris wheel, but you have to do both. You've got to move towards the target, and the mound is 10 inches high, and you got to use the slope of the mound going down. Abner Doubleday gave us an elevated surface. So we have to move down and we have to rotate. No pitcher has ever thrown a baseball without rotating.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's pretty insightful stuff. So hopefully everybody can unpack that and understand what he's saying. Scott, when you're obviously you're getting ready to head back to spring training and you'll have the big league guys there and everything, when do you start? I would imagine this is how you see everything now, that this is something that you do.
Yeah.
When is this something that you would start implementing this with a player? Is it high school, college, the minor leagues, the big leagues, as soon as you see them? How does some of those things work for you?
Well, I think it's as soon as you see them. But everybody does. The more somebody does something naturally, the better it is for everybody.
Yeah.
You can have what's known to coaches and evaluators the quote unquote bad delivery, but that bad delivery may be good for you. It may be the way that you move, the way you organize force, and the way you deliver the baseball going forward. It may look ugly to the naked eye, but understanding, okay, does this guy throw enough strikes? Does he create enough strikes? And what I mean by that is, we always use the term, do we throw enough strikes? But it's actually, do we create enough strikes? The big league level, the average strike thrower creates 64% strikes. So can we do that? If the guy is a bad mover, but he's creating 68% strikes, it's hard to go away from that and tell him, hey, you're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
If the guy throws the ball, and it irritates me to see online when we're posting videos of the guy trying to throw it into a 9 box and he throws it 6 feet over the 9 box. Obviously he's not moving the way he should be moving to be able to throw the ball into the 9 box.
For sure.
And then, as you get to higher levels of baseball, you got to be able to have an unloading time of, no more than 1-4 with runners on base, or guys are stealing. So you have to encompass that into the delivery as well. And the sooner you can get the guy to do that, for me, the better.
Yeah, absolutely. Which makes a ton of sense. And obviously, like the whole goal is to figure out how we can get guys to move to your point as efficiently and naturally as possible. Has there been a time in your career where you've seen what one of those deliveries that may not look great to the eye and aspect of things, and there hasn't been any pain, but there may be some performance issues. Like, have you changed things there, and how have you gone about doing so?
Yeah, I think you're always looking at changing guys when performance is poor and when injury risk is high.
Yeah.
And, those are, sometimes to players, it's hard to kind of like, oh, my shoulder's killing me all the time, but I'm getting outs. So now you gotta balance the two and say, okay, well, do we want to be sustainable and have a long career, or do we want to see what happens and keep going? And for players, most of them, when they're rolling good, they want to just keep rolling.
Yeah.
I take Tiger Woods. Tiger Woods blew out his knee golfing, and he's had his surgeries, and they say he's kind of changed his swing a little bit around. But has Tiger Woods been Tiger Woods since these changes in the golf swing to protect the knee? Somebody'd say, well, you should just keep playing or maybe have more surgery. I don't know. But it's a tough fine line when you're dealing with, outs matter most at the big league level. And, to most colleges, outs matter most as well. You go to East Carolina, I know where you're,
Yeah.
and that guy's not getting outs. He's not pitching.
100%.
So we got to find ways to be sustainable longer, but also get our outs.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you have 56 regular season games in college. Obviously, the big league level, there's a little bit more. But I want to touch on one thing that's kind of like flows into all this is like the relationship side. You've been at the level that you've been at for so long because, in my opinion, you're a really smart guy. But also, there has to be some type of human element where you can connect with the front office, the coaching staff, and the players, or you wouldn't still be there. So how have you learned to do that? How is that kind of ebb and flow of like building relationships?
Yeah, the one thing that I've always had to do that I've learned to do a lot better is be a better listener.
Yeah.
You don't want to go into the room and be the smartest guy in the room. You want to be able to listen and learn. I tease our analysts all the time that, they may give me something that at one point in time I think's funny. And like, what are you guys talking about? But they get me thinking. And then I go home and it might take me a little bit longer to process. And then I gotta kind of relay, can we do this? Is this guy capable of making this adjustment, whether it's a pitch design, movement, or just an overall arsenal change? So you got to be willing to listen to people. You gotta, like, I always love to tell the players, I don't work for you, you don't work for me. We work together to get you to be the best pitcher that you can possibly be.
Yeah.
And my job is to help maximize your potential to be a better pitcher. I think, we got to get back to the term pitcher
Yeah.
and not thrower. A lot of us, I see pitching as, and I've kind of used this analogy lately as being a cook.
Mm.
You go into a restaurant and you order a $70 steak, and that steak doesn't taste good. It's not probably because they didn't get the best ingredients. It's because the cook wasn't very good.
Yeah.
Then you go to maybe a lower level restaurant, you're like, man, that's the best steak I ever had, and it's $19.99. That guy can cook.
Mhm.
So at the end of the day, we have to collaborate with everybody, biomechanist, our nutritionist, strength and conditioning coach. Josh Cuffey for me is huge to help me with mechanics and mindset without kind of getting into players'
For sure.
domes on the mound. Hey, I need this guy to have a better leg block, but I don't want to force it on the mound because I don't want to get in his head. There's some guys you can give a lot of information to. Some guys you got to dummy down information. I think that comes with experience and being able to learn from some of the best pitching minds that I've learned
Yeah.
from in the game. And our front office, Moneyball, Billy Bean, David Force, Dan Feinstein, Bob Melvin and Mark Kotze, that the guys that, I listened to and learned a ton from, you know, how we communicate to players is big time, but how we listen and then communicate to the players is really good too.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And obviously people talk about that all the time. Like you have 2 ears for a reason and one mouth, so you can listen double the time. But oftentimes, and I can speak from my own personal experience, like coming into the collegiate profession and professional baseball, at times it was, hey, look what I know, look at what I can do for you, and how can I help the player? Like at some point in time, that has to take a back seat. You have to learn how to handle that and then continue to move forward. So it's awesome that you've been able to do that. What would you say is one of the biggest things that you like when you're evaluating talent? When somebody shows you, a high school kid or a college kid, like what are some of maybe 2 to 3 things that you look at that you say, hey, we should either take a chance on that guy or let's pass on.
Yeah, I think, for me, being at the big league level, when I'm looking at data, I'm just looking pure at how many strikes he can create. The first thing I'm looking at is if he can create enough strikes, then I'm assuming he's a competitor.
Right.
I'm assuming that he's the guy that's hunting down the hitter rather than getting hunted down. So I look at strikes, and then for young kids, I still look at projectability, body, room to get stronger. I believe in strength. I believe in stability and mobility. If he is a good athlete, does he play other sports and can he move around? Basketball, soccer. Soccer. There's a lot of extended running with the ball for 1 or 3 goals a game. It's a tough sport to play, but being able to be on your feet. I think all athletic moves start with your feet. If you got good feet and balance and coordination, that helps. So I want to see if the guy has good balance, has good coordination, and has projectability to get bigger and stronger. We go in and you look at a high school kid and he's 6'2", 225 right now, and he's already physically matured. This is who he is. Now, if it's good enough, then that's great. But can we take him to another ceiling? And those type of guys are the guys that I say, maybe instead of trying to get your pitches better, make better pitches. He's already there. He's already physically mature. He's throwing 96, 97, but he doesn't make pitches.
Right.
Can we get him to make pitches? And that comes to, that dynamic balance, direction, and finish. If he's got good dynamic balance, direction, and finish, and we like his stuff, then I think, he's worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really great explanation of all those things. Let's also dive into like the coordination. Like we talk about coordination all the time, and I talk about it with people that some of the schools that we consult with, and a plethora of different people. And there's been countless times where I've said the super high prospect isn't coordinated, and there are people that laugh at me. So how would you define coordination, and how do you guys maybe look at coordination?
Well, I think coordination goes back to that player preferences. How does he move? How does he produce force? In my opinion, a lot of people are getting a lot of pitchers to drop and drive, get that pelvis down into the ground, and they just don't move that way. I tease a lot of people and say, I'm 6'5", my wife's 5 foot. If there's something on top of the refrigerator, she asks me to go get the thing off the top of the refrigerator because I'm 6'5". But when I ask her to go under the sink and get something, she says I'm lazy because now I got to go. Why can't you move
Right.
down? Well, I'm 6'5". I don't want to move down.
Yeah.
I don't want to go under the sink. I'd rather go to the top of the refrigerator. You're 5 foot. You can go under the sink and not go to the top of the refrigerator. So in my opinion, that's where I think about with the pelvis. Guys that are getting too much into the ground, but they're guys that kick out and push out, have that early extension. So instead of trying to get him so much dropping the pelvis, everybody's going to be in the ground.
At some point in time.
At some point in time, it's going to be in the ground, how you use the ground. So if he automatically wants to constantly kick out of that poor posture, you're putting him in a poor position for balance.
Yeah.
And that's coordination for me.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. There's a school that we worked with that we literally just had that conversation this past week where the kid's mid-90s, got a really good arm. He's probably 5'11", maybe 6 foot, with his cleats on, super awesome kid. But he was getting so low that I'm like, look, you're running out of room to rotate your pelvis. And he's 94 to 96. Right. There's some good care. So it's like, maybe we just try standing a little bit taller and then being athletic from there. And then doing everything else. And then it was a touch harder with some more vert on it. And yeah, it makes perfect sense. So I think one of the coolest things about training baseball players and everything that I get to do on a daily basis, and I'm sure that you do as well, is it's never cookie cutter. Just because it worked for so and so doesn't mean it's going to work for the next prospect coming up, and really being able to have the understanding of what we're doing and having the methodology of how do we go find that stuff. For me, that's the most important.
Yeah, my first pitching coordinator as a coach was probably the greatest pitching coach I've ever been around in my life, and everybody else is right there with him. But Marty Demerit was his name, and everybody known as Dog. I mean, I came right in the room my first year in 2000 as a coach with the Pirates, and he said, "Don't ever cookie cut anybody." I mean, I was like right out of the chute. This is not what we do here. And he was so high advanced. He was drawing angles on with protractors on newspaper clippings in the late '80s.
Wow.
And he's got this still has he passed away last January, but his daughters still have the stack of stuff that this guy was so smart. He was he would build houses in the off season and build stuff, so he knew all the angles, and he taught me that at a young age in the pitching coach. And when you talk about the the stride length.
Mhm.
Tim Lincecum came around and I was an A-ball coach. Now all of a sudden everybody needs to have 120% of their height, their stride.
Right.
I'm one that always says your stride length is as long or as short as it takes for the backside to get through and over the front side with proper finish. What's proper finish? Once we identify what proper finish is for that athlete, then we know what his stride length is.
Yeah.
You look at a figure skater who keeps everything in tight and they're spinning real fast. Well, that correlates to the pelvis. If we're getting out there real long and that pelvis can't rotate that fast, then that stride length's not good enough for that guy.
100%.
So I think data has been important for us over the last 15 years, and it goes back to ASMI in the '80s when one of my pitching coaches, another great pitching coach, Rick Peterson, was around. The Chicago White Sox put Rick Peterson in Birmingham, Alabama in '86 to be the pitching coach because he was so in love with biomechanics, and that's where ASMI and Fleischig and Andrews were. So, the biomechanics isn't new.
Right.
It's just we're so good at quantifying now. It just makes everything a lot better.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Let's also dive into the finish. So how do you break down the finish and how do you teach the finish and how do you look at that and make sure that it's correct?
Well, I think that obviously the balance, dynamic balance, direction, and finish are important. Staying on the ground, staying down the slope on your backside, and linear, and then rotating into that lead leg block are important, and getting some trunk finish.
Yes.
I hear so much about rotation, rotation, rotation. I don't hear enough about getting some trunk flexion forward. And like I talked about earlier, the mound is 10 inches. So if we're just going to rotate into foot strike and depend on gravity to bring the ball down, you got some serious issues. But you need some trunk flexion. And if we can get our guys, I love 30 plus degrees of trunk flexion moving forward. Just because you're on an elevated surface, we need to be moving down. And I think if we get some good trunk flexion moving forward, we rotate that pelvis into the lead leg block and we stop and we stay moving forward.
Mhm.
The analogy of the motorcycle hitting the car. The motorcycle T-bones a car, the driver, which is the upper half, goes over the car. It needs to be moving forward. 24 inches is the rubber, 17 is home plate. And if we're taking too much momentum outside of those areas, we're not commanding the baseball as well as we could be, and we're not staying behind the ball and using what I think is the best force moving into the action, which is the strike zone.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you talk about just being able to. One of the biggest things that you've talked about multiple times so far is creating strikes. So if you initiate your movement and it's outside of where we're trying to go, which is linear towards the hitter and towards the strike zone, ultimately, if it starts very minutely messed up here, it's going to be magnified
Magnify.
10 times down there. So understanding how to quantify that and correlate that to make sure that you're taking care of where your body is here first is to me one of the most important things.
Yeah, if you leave the rubber poorly, your release slot, your spin access, your spin efficiency, all the ball metric flights can mess up. We only keep vertical movement, horizontal movement, spin rate, velocity between 55 and 65% of our pitches. to a 1.5 standard deviation. After that, we lose ball flight. We lose something. We lost a metric somewhere. That's why execution always plays. If you execute where the intended spin and ball flight is supposed to go, obviously those numbers increase a little bit more. But if I get a pitcher who loses their ball flight data, 40% of the time, then I got to start thinking, well, he's probably moving poorly. It gives me a why. It gives me a reason to go look for it. Be like, okay, why are we losing spin rate? Why are we losing spin efficiency? Why are our spin axis changing? Why is our arm slot changing? The best in the world are right around 60%. They keep those within a 1.5 standard deviation.
Yeah.
So if you're like 54%, you're doing something, you're moving some. Now it could be weather and atmosphere on a certain given day.
Yeah.
But if you're looking after the game and he was below what he normally is, something's going on.
Thanks for tuning into the Brandon Golden Show. Just wanted to talk briefly about Clean Fuego and our sponsor. So if you're looking for better spin efficiency and really to be able to throw the ball without cutting it and have true spin, check out Clean Fuego at cleanfuego.com. Thanks for tuning in to the Brandon Golden Show.
All right, everybody, we had a little bit of technical difficulty there, so we just switched over to the laptop, and we're going to keep rolling here. Certain guys in the big leagues are, at a 60% clip of being able to, repeat their metrics. We talk about all the time, I think it's happened at the lower level as well, like at the collegiate level. Like, people expect guys to be able to go out there and repeat their deliveries and repeat things all the time. Well, it's a very simple thing. Like, it's very hard for people to even repeat their signature. So being able to repeat their deliveries is a very difficult thing. So I think being able to talk about more of like the movement quality stuff and kind of how that goes it would be a really good thing to kind of jump back into.
Yeah, I think, obviously for me, if you repeat what you do, then you have the best ultimate chance to execute the best pitches.
Yeah.
If you repeat it good and you're considered what we would think is a good mover, then you can repeat those pitches even better. Those pitches maybe can be better. The metrics might show up. You might have more vert to a ball.
Yeah.
You might have more horizontal movement. You might have more sink and induced vertical break moving down to pitches. The better you move, in my opinion, the better you can execute your pitches. It doesn't mean you're a bad mover. You can't execute pitches, but the more you're sustainable, I think the better you are.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of shifting gears, we talked a little bit about like when you've had the opportunity to have guys to call guys up. What was that like for you when it was your time to do business?
Yeah, it was. Bob Melvin called me up, and when Bob Melvin calls you up in November, you're kind of putting two and two together when you see the name on the phone. And he said, "Emo, how would you like to be a big leaguer?" And for a guy who coached every single level of the minor leagues, started from the bottom. I did rookie ball. I did short season A ball when we had short season A. I did A ball for 4 years, double A for 4 years, triple A for 2 years, pitching coordinator, Arizona Fall League, Mexican Winter League. You never knew if you were going to be a big leaguer because I wasn't as a player, but I took those steps as a coach. I wouldn't trade it for anything because at some point in time in my career as a coach, I told myself I was going to be a big league coach in the minor leagues. I'm going to do everything that a big league coach should be doing in the minor leagues because the players deserve it. And ultimately, I got the call. And when I got to the big leagues, I feel like I didn't have to alter anything.
Yeah.
I was already doing these things. I was already studying video, putting together game plans. My experiences of working so long in the minor leagues has helped me, I think, be sustainable 12-year big league coach.
Yeah, absolutely. And to get to that level is a very rare thing. I mean, obviously, people talk about it all the time. Like, the number of big league players, there's more people that have been to the moon than have played in the big leagues. So, it's probably very similar. There's not a whole lot of big league coaches. There's not a lot of big league jobs. So, being able to be there, number one, is huge. Being able to be there as long as you have is outstanding. And we kind of talked about it a little bit. How have you learned and how have you grown since your time in the big leagues?
Well, I think you become a better listener.
Yeah.
My first 2 years in the big leagues, I was the bullpen coach. So my job was to listen to players, report back to the pitching coach, about, what their thoughts and what their feelings are. And seeing how the big leagues was, if I didn't have Kurt Young, the big league pitching coach, teaching me this is what the big leagues are all about. It's a players league. The players, are old enough and mature enough to understand who they are and what they're capable of doing. Our job is to play that little Picasso painter and fix up the edges. But also, you learn that, hey, you need to, give them, positive feedback. You need to give them realistic feedback. You need to be honest with them. You need to create that relationship with somebody that, hey, I want what's best for you. And sometimes it's pushing you and sometimes it's not pushing you. But you got to understand, I'm doing this for your betterment to get you to reach your maximum potential. And that's what I learned as a coach at the big league level, that, hey, let's sit back, let's relax, let's kind of evaluate the situation, how it's working, how they do things here. And, it made me a better coach.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I think that's hard for people to understand. And when I left East Carolina and got with the Dodgers in rookie ball, that was one of the things that I didn't understand. My boss, would tell me, like, hey, they're not going to LA tomorrow, like, relax. Like, we talk about development and the runway for that, and that's different depending on the player and the organization. But it's a very hard thing to understand, especially coming from the college landscape. How have you dealt with development and what that means in professional baseball, and how have you kind of, I guess, intertwine that with the competition aspect?
Yeah, I think development can be a tough word because that doesn't mean, when you hear the word development, for me, it's like, okay, he's not polished, he's not ready. We're still working on a lot of things. I think processes. If we use the word process, stick to the process, then that development word can kind of, we're instead of saying player development, if we say player process, because you're going out there. There shouldn't be one guy who doesn't go out there to compete to win the game
every day. Yeah.
You're playing in whether you're in Bluefield, West Virginia, where I started out my career, Trenton, New Jersey, where I played AA a lot. Those people that pay to come to the game, they want to see their town team win, right? So, but there are processes. Hey, you need to, get to the big leagues. You need to have a changeup. We want you to have a changeup as a starter. Here's the times that you should be throwing it. The coaches should be mixing in the process of when to be using these types of pitches. So, we want our guys to get to the big leagues and be ready and have that arsenal be ready. And, when I hear development, well, he's still developing. How about we're still processing and still, obviously we're working on our craft each and every day, but the word development scares me. It just kind of means that he's not ready yet.
Yeah.
And when you're in the big leagues and you don't want a guy to be in survival mode.
It's a tough place to be in survival mode.
It's tough. And there are guys that are in the minor leagues that are in survival mode too.
Yeah.
So you want to really try to put them where that process can work at the level they're at to be successful.
Yeah. How does one know that somebody's not in survival mode and that they're actually ready? Because obviously they're not facing big league hitters in the minor leagues. How does a staff, how do you guys look at them, and you specifically, how do you look at that and say, that guy's ready, let's go ahead and get that guy up here?
Well, I think, I use a term pitching above your means. A guy might, look, he's throwing 98, and then you kind of look at the stats. But, the average major leaguer throws 64% strikes, meaning he creates 64% strike. Doesn't necessarily, throw it in the box 64% of the time, because that's roughly 49% of the time we throw it in the box to create those average 64% strikes. But the elite major leaguer is creating 68% strikes. So now if you're down in the minor leagues and you create 62% strikes and you're throwing 98 miles an hour, how are we going to create 64 to 68%? We might have to back that down a little bit.
Maybe.
Right? You get a guy throwing 100 at 60% strikes, it's not, and he's 41% in the zone. That's not a viable option to come to the big. Well, he's got great stuff. Okay, he's got one tool.
Right.
He throws hard. We talked earlier about the chef and the ingredients. Okay, he has one good ingredient, but that doesn't mean the meal is going to be good.
Right.
So you're looking at strike throwing ability. Does he have the ability to create enough strikes to pitch in the big leagues and not just survive in the big leagues?
Yeah, that's a loaded thing there. Being able to pitch there day to day and not just be literally in survival mode. I mean, being in survival mode as a human being is a tough place to be. with 60,000 people watching you there's only one place to go is down. That's a tough place to be.
When you're coaching and you know what you're getting out of your player each and every day, you know who he is. He's going to throw strikes. He's going to work ahead. He's going to be in good counts. Those are all things that you want. If he gets hit a certain day, he gets hit. But when you're a coach and you're sitting in the dugout going, oh God, can we just we got to throw a strike here.
Right.
Or we call up a guy and you're looking at it going, man, how's he going to create some outs? He's not creating enough strikes. It's a tough situation to be for the coach. Now imagine it for the player, like you said. Now he's in survival mode. He's just trying to get through the game, and he's nervous. And I think don't pitch above your means. Don't, if you're a 96, 97 guy, don't try to be a 100 guy without command. Executing the pitch. Execute pitches wins. No matter what, you're going to have to execute at some point in time to be a good, sustainable big leaguer. You throw 100 and you got electric stuff and your ingredients are great, you have to execute to stay. So, I think we need to emphasize more execution of stuff, and in that process, your pitches are just going to keep getting better and better when you execute stuff. You can work on your ingredients. Yes, that's what we do all the time in the bullpen.
Right.
That's what we're doing in the weight room. That's what we're doing using our Kinetrax and our biomechanics stuff is to see, okay, what can we do in the synchronization of our delivery to be less stressful on the body, but ultimately throw the most strikes and then throw the most quality strikes. We've had guys for years throw 100 miles an hour that you've never heard of because they never threw enough strikes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a ton of guys. I mean, we've had guys that are locally around here that played D3 or even NAIA baseball that made the upper 90s, touching 100, that haven't gotten a chance, and it's because of your point there. They're not creating enough strikes to play in whether it's the minor leagues or the big leagues.
And then that's where I would say is that 100 miles an hour above their means. Is that the drag car just slamming on the gas and taking off and going as fast as you can.
Yep.
The guy that drives the drag car actually has to use the steering wheel. Could you imagine just you step on the gas, you go as hard as you can, that car is bouncing all over the place. That's what bad deliveries and pitching above your means do. You still have to drive the car.
Yeah. How do you teach that? How do you teach people to drive the car?
Well, I think it's having that dynamic balance, having that good direction, having that good finish, understanding that the plate is that 24/17, and we directionally need to be moving towards the plate. We talked earlier about the merry-go-round and the ferry. So you got to be both.
Definitely.
You got to be able to rotate and move down. Like we said earlier, the mound's 10 inches. We got to be able to move down the slope.
Yeah.
So, having that controlled aggression. I had plenty of, I'm a linebacker out there. And I'm like, okay, I don't need linebackers. I need pitchers,
right.
Getting them to understand that baseball is the game of baseball it's called pitching. It's not called just throw it as hard as you can. It might work for a few, but it doesn't work for all.
Yeah.
Or many.
It really doesn't. Not sustainably, maybe for a short amount of time, but not for a season, not for a career, not for 10 years in the big leagues. It's just not. It's not going to. How do you attack hitters? How do you game plan different things for different organizations or different players that you guys are going to face?
Yeah, game planning is a huge role. We get a ton of data in the big leagues. You get everything, ball flight data, the VAA, and everything coming out of the pitcher's hand, and how he's moving, how the ball's moving, where the hitter is in the box, where he's swinging, where his bat path are. There are some big league hitters, believe it or not, on the outer third of the plate have 0 hits for 2 years. So I don't care on those guys what your ball flight is. Just get the ball on the outer third. And then there are some guys on the bottom third. There's some guys up and in. So, if you can take your strengths and exploit a hitter's weakness, you're gold in the big leagues. Now, sometimes you have to go strength on strength, but the best pitchers, trust me, the best pitchers in the big leagues have a strength to exploit your weakness. That's why you got hard in, soft away, hard away, soft away. You got the ability to go soft away from the barrel, right on right, breaking ball, or change up right on left, change up and flip it from left on right and right on left. You got the ability to go soft away. You got the ability to go hard up and in, and you got the ability to throw breaking balls. You got the ability to throw a chase breaking ball. So we talked about your metrics, knowing if the four seam's got good enough ride where you can pitch to the top third, and knowing if your sinker's got more a horizontal movement and loose spin per se, we can pitch at the bottom of the third. But I do believe you don't just tell a guy with good ride, pitch to the top of the zone. Now you're taking 2/3 of the strike zone away from that guy. And then you don't get the guy ever looking down for a chase breaking ball. Four-seam guys have got to use both parts of the zone. Stretch the zone out the best you can. Don't take a third or 2/3 of the strike zone away from you. Pitching to the top of the zone is one of the hardest locations to throw because you're on an elevated surface moving down, yet you've got to keep the ball up. It's a hard place to throw, and a lot of young pitchers who are told just throw to the top of the zone, they push too many balls way above the zone, or they throw the ball, they pull it right down the middle. But if I can work my trunk flexion, we talked earlier about getting some trunk down and away, down and away, down and away, up, up, up. For four-seam ride guys, majority of your fastballs are going to be to the top of the zone. But if you don't go to the bottom of the zone, you never open up the top. So the data will tell us all this.
There's so many people that talk about that. If you have a good heater, if you have a four seam that's 20 vert and up, hey, throw it to the top of the zone. That makes sense. Yes, we want to have the swing and miss at the top of the zone. How do you teach a guy, maybe a high school kid, even a college kid, to use the other parts of the zone so they're ready to efficiently command the top of the zone when they get to throw ball?
Well, I think, if you have the data to show, this is what the best pitchers in the world do. They execute the whole zone. They stretch out the zone. They make the zone bigger by making guys swing outside the strike zone. And like I said, okay, let's just go throw a bullpen with that guy and say, I want you to throw every pitch to the top. I guarantee it. He spikes a few in the dirt. Or I need to throw every breaking ball in the dirt. They're going to hang their fair share, So I think visually showing people, what actually big league pitchers do by stretching the zone. 65% or more are visual learners. So if we're not using visualizations, graphs or video to teach players, we're doing them an injustice there too.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. We've talked a little bit about like the motor preferences. We've talked about ball flight. We've talked about how to attack hitters in different parts of the zone. In my opinion, some of the best in the world and people like you that are doing the things at the level that you're doing them. There's the science and all of this stuff, and everybody knows the data, the numbers, and anybody can go learn that. How do you take the art of coaching, the art of all of this stuff, and how do you mix it up, and how do you give it to these guys so they can go cook on their own?
Yeah, I think, like I said, I've been saying a little bit, listening to what they like to do, talk to our analysts some, and sometimes they may not like a certain pitch, but that pitcher may feel good about that pitch to try to stretch out the zone. Let's just say the sinker doesn't play that good in the zone when the hitters have to swing, but it plays in the zone, off the zone to move feet, to change eye levels, or that curveball may not be a great pitch, but if you can bounce that curveball, it makes your slider play a little bit better. So I think the understanding of that is really important.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. To that point about moving feet, have you ever seen players, and obviously if there's a guy that stays away from the outer third for 2 years and has no hits there, that's one thing. But have you ever seen somebody who may have like a heat map or a heat zone in a certain area one part of the year, and then you face them later in the year, and it's different? Or does anybody ever bait you guys into something?
Yeah, that's the best hitters in the world.
Yeah,
those best hitters in the world have adjustability.
Yeah,
there's a lot of hitters in the league that don't have adjustability. They just want to do one thing. One of the greatest hitters of all time is Mike Trout, right? And when we throw Trout away and he's willing to hit the ball to the second baseman where our second baseman is playing up the middle and there's no guy standing there, Mike Trout gets a base hit. But the more we throw him middle in and hanging breaking balls, the more he pulls the ball, the more he's a dangerous threat. So now we got to be able to, kind of keep him honest by moving him in and out, up and down, back and forth. But the best hitters in the world take what you give them. Yeah. And they're adjustable. And the best hitting coaches in the world do the exact same thing. They know the game plan. That's, game plan, plan A is what is done on paper with the analytics, and this is what it is. Plan B is what the opposing hitters are trying to do against you. And plan C is when the pitcher comes into the dugout and say, I don't have anything today. What are we going to do?
Right.
I know when Brett Anderson, I love Brett Anderson, BA, great pitcher, left-handed guy we had. When we played Seattle for a couple of games, we knew right out of the chute their game plan was just take his four-seamer to right field, take his changeup to right field. So we were like, hey, it might be early in the game. We're adjusting to moving them off the plate in early more often because their plan is going to be to go the other way and take you to right field, probably from inning one. So if you just see the first hitter of the game kind of dive out there a little bit and try to go to right field, hey, make sure we're standing guys up, keeping guys honest, getting some strikes inside. It's important to watch the game. And that's why you play the game on the field.
Yeah, makes a ton of sense. Scott, this has been amazing. Thank you so much, number one, for agreeing to do this and spending some time with us. It's been outstanding. Thank you for coming to the lab. I really appreciate it. Really look forward to what you guys are going to do this spring in spring training and then ultimately in the season.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Thanks again for watching the Brandon Golden Show.